Phenomenal work, Craig. Wow. I mean, the mock-up is so good here. It really expresses a truly epic tone poem kind of sound. And yeah, I really love what you did here at D. I've just flipped back the page slightly so that we can start at the beginning of E here. But yeah, just fantastic stuff. This is one of those things where I kind of wish I would start at the beginning again, just to kind of work my way through things sequentially and look at the logic behind all the decisions. But that's fine. I'm going to stay with the sort of backwards approach on this. Now, I noticed something here is that you go to a molto rallentando with your tempo, and then here you go really fast, bum 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 bum. Like you just really turn on the speed here, and there is nothing in the markings in the system text that gives us any indication of that. Probably a conductor would, without any other feedback, would conduct your score, more like dun 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 dun. And you know what? I mean, I kind of prefer that tempo to this sort of kind of nervous rabbit kind of dun 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 kind of idea. Um, yeah, I'm wondering if that is like perhaps an error or something else. But anyways, it just really kind of feels unnatural. It's kind of a neat trick to sort of pull the rug out from under your like this massive harmony that's happening right up to the bar line, and then just continue on with horns and strings. I'm not going to say if that's bad or good. Everybody has their own approach to it, but it does work for what it's worth, and I do appreciate that you have given us a diminuendo to, you've given us a destination to the end of the hairpin right here. Exactly right. One little thing to point out, and that is the in the piano score anyway, the things tie forward, right? So the next bar is tied to a dotted half note, or excuse me, a dotted whole note. So it really takes two entire bars for the piano to decay. And it really does feel, I mean, especially with this sort of scurrying kind of a speed, it really does feel somewhat, kind of like a mouse rattling around on the bottom of the pantry. I think that if you add the horns going forward, it just feels more like a natural flowing upwards. However, let us stick with this bar, okay? Looking pretty good. I like where you put the fermata. The fermati. Now, here you're saying tenuto on your contrabassoon and pizzicato on your double basses. So just as long as we're clear that that this is going to be kind of a little a little bit blocky, right? Ba 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 ba, rather than dun dun dun. It's like the notes aren't individually articulated. They're just, well, I mean, they are individually articulated, but they aren't. They don't each have a shape that is unique. They're all just kind of going, just kind of a block of tone one after the other. It's kind of an interesting effect when you double it with pizzicato. Very cool. All right, now let's check out our options going forward. Pizzicato continuing on with contrabassoon, and then bass clarinet coming in. Doo-dee-dee-dee. This leaves a low B that is not in the original piano score. So I think that fading out pretty quickly is indicated, so that we're left with the sound of the violas and the bass clarinet, kind of more as a solitary tone. I think that works a little bit better. Harp is cool. I don't think it will be noticed very much or make much of a difference, but you can leave it in. I would mark it up to like more like mezzo piano here for it to make a meaningful contribution to the sound. Now here you're like another thing is you're going really quickly and then coming in with arco immediately. And, bum 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 arco, bum 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 arco. And it's not impossible. It's just I'm thinking to myself as a violist. Yeah. I just think all the more reason for this to go a little slower. It's not that it's impossible, but it's just a little annoying. I like the slow fade in here of the melody note, the upper melody note, and I like how the function trades off to the cellos, but I almost feel like there's a continuity issue here, right? So you're going, so it's this B and this B, the same exact note. Yeah. I mean, it'll still work, but yeah. Almost wish that this were cello, right? And then it could continue on in its basic position, but that's not really possible from where you orchestrated or how you set this up. I mean, if you had let go of this right away, then this could have dovetailed to a unison with the cello here, and then it could have just continued on. Anyway. So you keep this harmony in here softer, so as to not interfere with the octave chord or the way that the melody is scored with those tones in the middle. Yeah, and then these pitches coming in here. It works with the way that you've scored it, and the sound set works, but there's still a danger of these upper pitches here, clarinets and so on, for the winds to kind of start to dominate things a little bit. I know it kind of doesn't really feel like it here, but it's okay in this case, I would say for the winds to stay as a background timbre. I mean, just so it's really clear to the conductor to keep that low voice, middle voice melody prominent. Yeah, I mean, it'll still work fine with the way that you've marked it, but it's still, almost feel like it should be a little bit more in the background rather than the foreground. And this is all so nice. You da da dum bum. Yeah, it's so nice. Yeah, and I just really love the way that you drop to the violas and the cellos working together in unison here. Doloroso, yeah, you really do make it feel that way with a push to mezzo forte. And then also here, like, I completely approve of the push to mezzo forte as well in your double reeds here. And then, with these pitches doubling the cellos and violas, it really does give it a lot of weight, a lot of emotional weight. Just such a cool idea. And then, the horns, basically, doubling what the oboes are doing at the octave below. Yeah. Yeah, really, really nicely scored right in there. And then, da, 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 da. Right, and descending and so on. You worked out the pedaling and everything else. This isn't it isn't really necessary for the player, but I think it is necessary for the composer, right? Just to really make sure that they have worked out all of the changes and they don't end up with the tuning in a sling, right? So, my only question would be: is there any rolling here? Is it brlium da dum? Yeah, and then brlium dum da da. rolling would actually be kind of nice. It would help bring out the sound of the harp against all of these nice radiant winds right in here. About the only problem I can really see with this right in here is the cross voicing that you have between like horns and flutes. So, I mean, if you want this flute part here to play more of a role, then it really is kind of more of a clarinet part with the horn on top. And you can mark it pianissimo all you like, but it still is stronger than first octave flute. It doesn't sound bad in the mock-up, but it's not realistic the way that everything is sounding there. Okay, and then the piccolo is also at risk because it's so close to the horn. It's like only about a perfect fifth away, and it's also in its weakest register. Yeah, I'm just not so sure that this will work. And also, bassoon, a very, very radiant, kind of ruddy sounding overtones, is also extremely close to the flute with at the same exact volume. I'm just really not sure about this, Craig. A little ting from the triangle is absolutely adorable. And then here we go with some just really a gorgeous way of playing this solo, interpreting this solo right in here. Like ting, 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 ting. Which of course sounding an octave higher. It's in the perfect register, and it just sounds fantastic. And I almost wish that the horns could come in late here. Do you know what I mean? Like starting off here at triple P, and then maybe on the second beat of the baton, or even the middle of the bar, starting in at pianissimo, and just being a little late to the crescendo, and of course staying under at mezzo piano. And I think that you would have something that did not get in the way of this last harmonic, because you see, it's not just the harmonic and the first beat, it is also the decay of the harp, right? The strong part of the decay will be over the first half of the bar. As this pushes in, by the time it gets to here, it's mezzo piano, and it is eating up the harp quite a bit, especially in the brass, right? So if they could start at like almost nothing, like triple P, just kind of joining in, if we are at mezzo piano by the beginning of the bar, and the horns and tuba are coming in at, doubling these pitches at and the middle of the bar from at triple P, I think that you get this nice graduated effect, and it won't push too quickly. Right, and then clarinet. I don't think you need to do A2 clarinets here, A2 clarinets. I think that like you don't want a phased sound here, right? Like, which is what you get with two clarinets in unison. It's a slight kind of band sort of a sound, rather than having that real individuality of character, right? So really think about this before you assign this. And also the handoff, right? So this is a handoff rather than a dovetail. So like one part is following the other one. So it's giving over, it's surrendering its role as soloist to the next player. You have a phased sound here, quite pronounced, like as it's crossing, it's sort of jumping from the low clarino to the high shallow register, and then so you'll have that sort of phase sound. Then you'll have a solitary sound here. I mean, it's not such a crisis because you've got it's doubling cellos and so on, but yeah, and then of course this is doubling violins, and it's doing it kind of behind, but it's still, well, I guess it's okay, but I'm just still just a little dubious about using two clarinets because it doesn't really, in terms of weight and tone color, it really doesn't matter. I don't think you need to use two clarinets. I think that just in terms of the balance and the color, I think it's better just to use one clarinet handing off to one double bass, one bass clarinet. Both of those doubling the string lines right in here. I think you just get a much more even kind of a sound. And this is lovely too, the way that the horns and tuba fade along with the strings. Yeah, and this is just perfect right in here. Yeah. And a nice, like, soft tutti chord here at the end. Not so sure that you really need to have everybody. These should be fermatas over just standard bar rests, right? Rather than the dotted dotted whole note. But like maybe this was the only way to get your mock-up to work correctly, the playback for your system. I don't know, but it should just be or maybe it looked weird to you to have the whole note, the bar rest. Not whole note, the bar rest sitting in the middle and not lined up. Maybe that was the issue. Anyway, but good proportions here. Pianissimo in the strings and the winds, and triple P in the brass. I think that will all just absolutely sound beautiful. And what you're hearing in the mock-up is pretty much, what will happen in real life. So excellent ending to this. Really, considering the wonderful emotional journey that you take this orchestration through, is the absolute perfect ending. It's exactly how you needed to finish what you scored previously. And so, back to D, where there's some really, really cool stuff going on here. Some things are going to need a little bulking up. Yeah. So, let's just really address the way things are put together here. Starting with your cascading octaves. So, so far, with the harp and the winds and everything else, it's really beautifully put together. I think that it'll be extremely effective, and I think that you could mark your harp all the way up to forte, right? Or even poco forte or something like that. But just like in other words, a rich sound that isn't background, right? You want it to really bring out the octaves here, not get overwhelmed at the same time, right? And just a little caution. What pizzicato does, I think we might have had this discussion about what pizzicato can do to the projection of the harp, right? It can really swallow up the sound, even in a situation like this, right, where you have, where it's in violas and it's interesting the choice to go enharmonic here with the harp, and just to get the maximum amount of of string length. I think that's wise. But still, the harp is going to have to amp up a little bit. But so pizzicato, that's fine. And I can also see the logic of just wanting a little bit more weight as the cascade falls down further. I mean, it really is a rather masterful insight right in there. Just really, beautiful craft approach right in there. And, excuse me, I like how the low F sharps are separate rather than anticipatory, right? So they really are their own kind of, you're taking the approach of what if they were sustained piano tones, right? So, and you've got the decay built right into each one. So that's cool. Now, we're going to study this melody in a minute, but just to stay on the subject of the of the cascading octaves. Okay, so here you are falling into a trap, Craig. Okay, the trap being that when this part is when the piano score reaches this part, the octaves are lower just because it makes it easier for everything, all of the parts to relate to each other. But just because, as a pianist, but just because that is the situation for the piano player, that doesn't mean that you have to emulate what they're doing, right? So, like, for instance, right here, you're giving this same scoring to like low flutes, right, rather than keeping the flute up. Yeah. So it would almost be better if your flute part were an octave higher and then you brought in oboe more to fill in the space, right? See, like here you have you're scoring across lower flute, kind of falling on the tail of the piccolo and oboe working together. And that's fine, just so long as things do not get any louder than that. But once they get past this point, that lower flute scoring is toast. Right? It just cannot compete with the surge that you have built in right here. So it would be better that you kept the octaves high rather than dropping, right? Which is just a pianistic thing, right? So just to keep the octaves high and build in more weight in the oboe and so on as things connect as they drop. But then you have the added problem here that there is just no way for the harp to make, like by the time this happens right in here, as you're adding the horns and then the lower heavy brass and so on, the harp is just gone at this point, right? It would almost be worth it to like just take the harp up an additional octave, right? Or something, and piccolo as well, just to try to get some kind of sense of cascade coming through there that doesn't get swallowed up by the increase of weight from all the other parts. Okay. All right, so back up now and talk about the melody. So here it's, you're pretty much staying in the string section for those functions, though you start to bring in the your middle winds for the little counter melody, the little, not counter melody, but the middle voice. Da 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 dum. That's really nice. So, this is all, I would say this is all scored pretty well. Yeah, Divisi. Might be easier to score this as octaves in your first violins, just so that they're more resonant to each other, and then sixths in the second violins, right? And I just think that's a little bit better than sixths stacked on top of perfect fourths. Yeah, and especially here, dun 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 dun. I'd really rather have octaves in the first violins. But this is all really cool, and I like the way that you're working around with the cascading octaves and still throwing in the middle voice where you can, and so on. Yeah. All right. So you have a big push here, and just to mention that I really love the way that you set up D. You have this. It's more massive just because of the mass of instruments playing at the same time, right? They don't really ever get to forte, but it feels like a fortissimo just because of so much tone weight, and then you just ease right off. And I would say that like the way to get to this would be to put in like a comma right here in system text, so it shows up in all the parts. So there's just a slight breath, da da da, dee doo 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 dee doo. Right, so it's just the conductor can just put in a slight breath there, and then it just helps set this up. Right, the melody comes in, and it is unobstructed. You would need that anyways in subito piano. All right, so here you are, absolutely pushing towards a forte, a definite forte, and you've got your glissando ripping upwards, And we've got our octaves here, tremolo octaves. And I think that this actually works really, really well, just with the brass playing those jazzy, impressionist era chords. You know, ba ba ba, da 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 da. I don't think you need to leave a big space here in terms of this rest. You know, you could maybe tie this across to the value of a quarter note and then leave an eighth rest for them to breathe. But I think it's just too big of a gap. And same thing here. Yeah, just it feels too deliberate the way that it's scored. Yeah, and this is just really, really cool. The way that the you're avoiding the like those leaping octaves, and instead you're sort of, you are scoring everything out in repeating notes and repeated intervals, which are looking forward to this, right? It's just really wonderful foreshadowing. Yeah, and just and then this heartbeat going on here, bum 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 in the bassoon and contrabassoon, very, very effective. And then ta ta with a crash on the cymbal and bass drum. And I also thought it was rather cool the way that you didn't overuse the crash here, the crash and the bass drum, right? Like you don't come in with bass drum again until here, right? And you don't have another crash until there. So real, like. It's the kind of thing where if you put it in all the time, then the audience expects it, right? And then after a while, they get bored with it, And it's kind of like, sort of reminds me of certain sci-fi film franchises where people want, whenever they're rebooted or people add a chapter or a new series or something like that, what the longtime viewers want is they just want to return to their familiar characters and hear more stories about them in exactly the same style, idiom, direction, actors, everything else. They just want to, they want more of the same. It's like going back to that perfect meal that you had at that one restaurant. You go back there again and again, and it never tastes the same as it did the first time, or that time that you ate the perfect meal. So, it's the same thing with like using certain effects for emphasis. Using them sparingly means that the audience will really pay attention to them, and maybe even feel them where they aren't, right? They'll say, "Oh wow, that was such a splashy climax to that piece that Craig orchestrated," and they'll say, "Well, they're actually, there are only two big cymbal crashes." Oh really? Huh? Well, geez, I just felt like it was splashy, right? Then you've achieved your goal. All right, so I really love the way that you turn the functions upside down here. And I thought that was very, very wise, something I wish that I had thought of, but I had a completely different plan. So I don't begrudge you thinking of it when I didn't. But yeah, like going on to this, precipitoso part right in here. You interpreted the arcing patterns. I love the way that you left no gaps, right? You just had it all going in, just like really had the and you also had you also have double tonguing here, and of course like a measured tremolo, same thing, with the bow, just really, really effective, hugely effective. And then ripping up here with a piccolo and the oboes working together on these just absolutely people just don't write oboe trills. It's like does the oboe just have to be this beautiful innocent little instrument that just plays these beautiful one note solos and has almost no no fingered fingered tremolo or measured tremolo or trills or anything like that. It does not have to be. In my own scoring, I kind of draw the line with multiphonics and fluttered tonguing, but yeah. I mean, it's just not to my taste. Doesn't mean that it doesn't have its place, but who knows? I might throw it into some piece someday. Yeah, just really lovely. And then then your middle winds and your horns just blasting away at chunk, 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 and it's just so exciting. And you're leaving a bit of space here. I think you could leave a little space in your middle winds as well, but keep your violas going on this. Da dun da dun. Really, really nice. And I noticed that you have opted for the enharmonic option here, and that's perfectly fine, just as long as you get the pitches right and their relativity to one another. That's fine with me. Yeah. Yeah. And then here we get to a point where we start to sort of trade around some of the functions. And that also works great because it's a place where we really need piccolo and first and second violin to come in with these soaring octaves. And wow, with the like all four of these horns chipping in underneath, it really is amazing. It works great, and of course trombones adding some harmony in here along with your clarinets and so on. Really, really great. And I like the Divisi cellos right in here. I think that's absolutely perfect. Divisi cellos working with the violas on the measured tremolo here. And yeah, I mean, this, yes, totally like an oboe player should be able to go or actually they don't do double tonguing, but they can do single tonguing really fast. It'll work really, really nicely. Yeah, just so long as the conductor doesn't push it too fast, they'll know not to do that if they're a good conductor. Yeah. Ba 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 ba. Right, and then ba ba, you go woo. It is like pushing on the octave up into the high register of the horn is such a Hollywood thing. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, it's sort of like the forced double take that you sometimes see in like Mel Brooks movies. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like everybody suddenly stares at the ceiling when the horn goes up an octave. Yeah, I think there's also a moment like that in Airplane or Top Secret. There's Zucker Abrams movies. So yeah, So I would say that like in a piece like this, you only get to do that twice before people start to sort of giggle, and you do it twice, and that is as much as you ever need, right? And then once again, you shift roles, low horns, trumpets, and trombones, right? The low horns and trumpets take over the repeated notes, and then you get your measured tremolo in middle strings here, oboes continuing on, and this time bass clarinet going, doing the arcing stuff along with the trombones. That's all really cool, and meanwhile, just you really get a lot of mileage out of changing around the bass, right? That's such an important thing. That's something I didn't do, but I take my hat off to you for doing this, just to find a way to create some interest right in here, just right along with the thump and the bass drum, and you sneak it in right when you go up. We throw in the octave here on the horn, so it's just a wonderful combination of events all happening at once. All right, and then a rip upwards with the flute, and we're back to the stuff that we had in piccolo and oboes before. Right, this time with piccolo and flutes doing their their little birdie tweets as oboes continue on with their ta 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 ta. It's good that you're giving the oboe players a little bit of a break here, right? Because it just after a while the tonguing gets a little worn out, right? But middle string should be able to do it for quite a while before their arms wear out, right? And then we're continuing on with the octaves and so on, and support from below from trumpets here, and then you get one more of these kind of moments, supported from above by flutes, which I think is extremely effective, and of course your strings going up to tremolos. Yeah, and sort of trading off here, bass trombone, tuba, and low strings combining with the with your low winds. Yeah, yeah, and meanwhile, just like some of the same things happening as before: repeated strings, repeated brass, repeated winds. All right, and then here, nice and fat, bum 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 bum. You know what I mean? It's really like, yeah. So here you're going to sharps. Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense. But like for this to make sense, this needs to be an E sharp. Okay. So yeah. So just change these to E sharps. If you're changing the entire context back to sharps, looking forward to to the new tonality, kind of starting off in E minor and eventually working back to a G6 chord. I remember once I taught a class on composition and scoring for a chamber quartet, mixed chamber, and I just mentioned really offhand without any qualification, six chord, when I was sort of testing the students to see what they knew, and they kind of got puzzled because they were thinking like, oh, what do you mean a 6/4 chord or a 6/3 chord? In other words, an inverted voicing of a triad. And so, yeah, so I always, ever since then, I've always felt a little nervous about just saying 6 chord, but I think you guys know what I mean. And this is lovely right in here. That I think that since you are really going molto rallentando here, then it's cool to go, fortissimo, diminuendo to mezzo forte, and push forward to fortissimo again. Where in other scores, I might be recommending to go to forte piano here or fortissimo piano here, and then crescendo. But I think that this works out really well the way that you got it scored, especially with the context of all the other parts, and then also the push forward to triple F here in these other parts. And, I just really love the way that you drop off a cliff here. It's not what Barvinsky scored, but it works great. One little fly in the ointment here is, this second flute note. You didn't want to write that, did you? You weren't thinking when you put that in there, right? Yeah, because you're thinking, since I'm sort of doubling string parts and other kinds of things right here, then this will go there. But this B does not exist. It has been shattered beyond recognition. Even at the mezzo forte by your first trumpet player here. Okay, so it would be better for you to go A2 here, A2 here at the top, on the top B, doubling with the divisi, upper divisi, first violins. All right, so really, really awesome climax to this piece. It just really, no holds bars, and yet just so beautifully, carefully, craftfully, artfully scored. Such a great job. Okay, so back to the beginning of this cool arrangement. And, I'm kind of wondering, Craig, I've gotten a few entries from you over the past few years, and I'm wondering if you could work out a way of having your scores a little bit wider, like the, I think it's 747 by 420, if I recall correctly, just offhand. Yeah, I mean, just something that will really fill the screen without leaving these big gaps at the edges, and like maybe if there's any way of bringing up the font size a little bit, and I know, I mean, you just have these massive scores, so maybe there isn't a way. Yeah, but it's just a little hard to point certain things out. I mean, I think people will just have to take entries like this and play them back on like a big screen big desktop screen, or maybe on their smart TV, which is what I really, really strongly recommend for these lectures, is just to watch the whole thing on your smart TV using the YouTube app. And most people watch Netflix and Amazon Plus and so on there. So why not watch this on there, where you can just really see all the details, and your cat can have an amusing time chasing around this. It's over here now. Well, wait, now it's over here. Oh, watch somewhere out there, somebody's cat is chasing around, or just at least watching this very, very weird mouse pointer. Okay, so that's just my little request. At least if you can just make it wider to those same screen standards, it would be really awesome. Maybe it doesn't work on your system. I don't know. All right, so right here at the beginning, really nicely scored. I just love the touch of horn right in here. Very, very subtle. Just a thought here, you could actually just leave out the crescendo here, because that is almost implied with the motion that is going on in here, right? There's just going to be a little increase of strength, with the rise from B to E and so on. So I don't really think that this needs to go crescendo here, and I also think you don't need the crescendo here as well, and maybe the diminuendo at the end. And there's the other issue too, and that is, like, overall your marked dynamic levels are not changing, right? So do you really want this to be piano with a few nuances and then a diminuendo at the end, which doesn't tell us where it's going? If you're entering here with piano in your horns, shouldn't the winds be mezzo piano by then? And shouldn't we kind of know it? This crescendo marking is, I believe, I'm just taking a quick look. It's an artifact left over from the piano score. But wouldn't it be better if we, continued this game here? Like, imagine, da 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 da, and then from here, starting kind of a new phase, a mezzo piano, da 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 da, and then da 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 da, and then here just have a crescendo without a diminuendo in both parts, and then here pushing towards a mezzo forte, da 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 da, diminuendo 2. Back to piano, right? Or pianissimo, if you like. I like the piano because, like, you can really hear the relationship between the doubled clarinet and oboe here, and the flute on top and the bassoon on the bottom. It's a really beautiful combination. And then that solves all the problems here. Leave this at piano. You can put in the crescendo or not. It doesn't really matter, right? But so try that out. Just kind of continue, like, hairpins here, same hairpins here. Excuse me, not the same hairpins here, just a crescendo at this time on both of these parts. And then going to a mezzo forte at the beginning of this bar, I'd say mezzo forte from here for these parts, mezzo forte there, leave this piano, leave in or take out the crescendo here. Definitely have a diminuendo at the end, and then diminuendo down to piano or pianissimo. All right, try that out on your mock-up and see how it sounds. All right, so just thinking of the actual scoring itself, hard to fail if you have flute and oboe in octaves in these registers. It just is such a pleasant sound. Just so long as you don't drive the oboe down below D, I think. Like once you start getting down to, like, C sharp, C, B, B flat, it really starts to get an imbalance with those same pitches an octave higher in the flute. Just timbrally and in terms of strength and everything else, the overtones and just the strengths are all over the place. But right here, where you got the middle register of the flute, right where it's just starting to brighten up, the occasional push up into the upper register and so on. And then oboe here, like, kind of in its beautiful, sweet middle register before things get too sticky down below or pointy up above. I think it works great. And then, of course, the telescoping here. And then just really nice use of the oboe right in here, continuing on. And, this throwing in that little stray note, the C, right? Da, 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 da. Yeah, so the coming in early on the C, and then the clarinet being able to continue on the arc as it goes, right? Um, yeah, well, pretty cool the way you scored this all out. Yeah. Yeah, so that has my complete approval, and so does the scoring here of the clarinets. So just for everybody who's really gotten used to the clarinet in A, this is one of those rarer scores with clarinet in B flat, and it makes sense if you're going to reinterpret the harmony at the apex of this piece in enharmonically, then yeah, you might as well just go with B flat clarinet. I still like the trending of the tonality here towards the sharp. It just, I don't know, makes me want to use a clarinet more. But then you have trending to the other direction, right? With with a section of this piece in C major, right? So anyway, it doesn't really matter in the end. Both instruments do equally well. So yeah, and then just the touch of horn is enough to give this a timbral evolution or progression, right? There could have been a little bit more progression of the texture right in here, perhaps. Maybe trading off with strings or adding strings or some other kind of thing. But actually leaving them out can also be powerful too, because like you've got these little bridges right here of horn both times, and it changes the context of the timbre enough to indulge in some storytelling, right? Just so long as you fix the dynamics so that they're clearer. So I really love the beginning, to put it short, right? And it's a great way of these, for these principal players to really, they're sitting in a square, right? The first flute player is sitting next to the first oboe player, and behind them the first clarinet player is sitting next to the first bassoonist, and they're just in this little box together, and they can make the most beautiful sound when in that close proximity, just listening to each other's intonation and everything. It's a wonderful way of seating, and this kind of scoring really brings it out. And of course, you have those little bits and pieces that Barvinsky added. The sounding G that pushes forwards, the sounding C right in here, right? So those are all really great, really well scored in this. All right, so continuing on now from here, like you are a little sloppy. Sorry, that's a kind of a pejorative thing to say. You are a little careless with your tempo markings, right? So we should go back to tempo, right? And the tempo here is here it was 88 to the quarter note, and what he intends here is 88 to the dotted quarter note, right? So not 88, like if you had just left this same thing and said, oh, I put quarter note equals 88, and it just sounded completely wrong. That's because he's thinking of the beat, right? So the beat of the baton, the imaginary baton, of course it's a piano piece, so it doesn't really have a timekeeper telling the pianist what to do, but you would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at this slower tempo, right? Just a separate beat of the baton for each beat, rather than beating in 2, which sometimes happens in faster compound time. But here the compound time is 12/8, right? So that's 4 groups of 3, and so that would be conducted in 4. So each of those beats would be the equal of this, and also if you just listen to pianists handle this, they go even a little faster, but you're going really faster, right? So I would just say watch out with that. Okay, you do not need to go that fast. I mean, there's a certain coolness to going that fast. That means that you don't really have to accelerate that much in the middle of the piece. I get it. But all the same, it just seems a little hurried, right? Because what's happening here? It's like a consciousness is being born in the middle of this beautiful land, this gorgeous country, wheat fields and deep blue sky, and it's morning and there's still, dew on the wheat stalks, and I mean it is like you can just smell the fresh air here, and the becoming into being of an idea, of a person, of a consciousness. And then here the landscape opens out, right? So how fast do we need that bird to soar over that landscape? Is it in a hurry to get from one end to the other? It sort of feels that way with this, with the pace that you've set here. But that's just my perception. That doesn't mean that it is, or that anybody else would prefer it one way or another, right? But I'm just wondering if you could dial it back a little and then push more towards the middle of the piece. And I think it would also make certain lines a lot clearer. Now here, have you given a thought to bowing patterns? Right? So here you're going down, up, right? Or this would have to be 2 up bows in a row, or they might break this into down, up, if they really were to pay attention to this. And there's just a natural strength of up bow and a natural falling off from down bow. So if you cut this slur down to just slurring the last 2, you got down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, right? It just works a whole lot better. Totally approve of what you're doing here with strings, just keeping it in strings and having this beautiful flowing gusher of an interpretation of those left-hand patterns, and then throwing in the ya-da-da right in here, the interaction of the middle voice with the pattern. It's just really well done. It's simple, straightforward, incredibly effective, and I also love the long bows that you're taking here in these parts. That's what I feel needs to happen. You went even longer than I did, and I think in my arrangement, but I think both approaches work pretty good. And then here you broke it up so that you would get a firm down bow, or up bow, starting right, pushing into the next, pushing forward from the upbeat. Yeah. So this is the kind of place where you might see, you might get your part back and you might notice that there have been 2 up bows in a row, right? So doing your own planning, down, up, up, down, right, would be really effective. Right. Now, if you want to continue matching the phrasing and the bowing, you could do that here. You could do that here, having them both start their bows at the same time, right? You could do that here. So that just might be more cohesive, just with keeping the bowing together, keeping the strength together. All right, crescendo from, I'm just checking from piano. All right, crescendo to mezzo forte over the course of 4 bars. I would say if you're going to go crescendo for more than 2 bars, make it poco a poco crescendo. Okay? Just because a lot of times orchestra players will interpret crescendo as just being what's here in the bar, what's here maybe over the next bar or so. But if they don't see you cannot guarantee that if they don't see any kind of marking that they will interpret this crescendo to last the whole 4 bars. They probably will, but since you've thrown in an extra crescendo hairpin on top of that, they might just say, oh, well, maybe just wants me to get a little warmer right in here, right? So poco a poco crescendo is the key. That covers all bases. They know that they're going to keep going, getting louder until they see the next clear dynamic marking, right? And then this, you don't get rid of this because it just gives extra impetus and gets the players focused on pushing into the mezzo forte. Now here you would absolutely have to say subito piano or piano subito right in here. However, I feel that it's a little, you can barely hear this at all. What function is it serving if we can't hear it? Right? It just, you have some pitches around that, over the similar area, and they're just getting swallowed up by the that wonderful ruddy resonant quality of the winds right in here. It's just really swallowing them up. This is really lovely the way that this comes in. I would come in from a pianissimo just to get just to have the winds emerge from the strings a little bit better rather than piano. Like the articulation here is what you don't want to hear, right? You want the winds to surge into the function of these players right in here. Here you're keeping the bass down to a mezzo piano. I don't think you need to do that. I think everybody can be mezzo forte all together, and I think it'll work fine. And then, yeah, it rolls in your harp at forte. That makes sense. And then, then a push in with suspended cymbal and timpani. It's just really, really, really great. And it gives it that, here you're kind of getting to that sort of bittersweet A minor, going down to a D7th chord in the piano score, right? So it's the perfect place to put that in. And yeah, like really nice coordination here. Clarinets and bassoons working with violas and cellos. And, it's a really good combination. It works. It's fine. My only wonder here is that whether or not you could have added some kind of nuance to guide the rise and fall of the melody, Da, 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 right. Da, da, and then just, really, I really love the way that you're pulling away from that to a pianissimo, right? And this should also be, I see what you're doing. You're putting a little punch at the bottom of this bass clarinet note. Just make sure that it's not too loud, right? It would be okay to go to pianissimo here. And then you're just adding this as a way of kind of hanging on to a pitch that is coming from your bass clarinet here, the sounding B, or excuse me, sounding A, written B. Yeah, and then this holds on as it dovetails into the solo clarinet part. See, I think that's built really, really nicely. Fade out, right? Don't just let it cut off. Yeah, and then right in here, I feel that just kind of to check the harmony here. Right. Yeah, see, so I feel that this is perhaps a little too much harmonic guidance right in here. I feel like we're just kind of hearing the same chord twice, right? Yeah. Yeah, don't have too much of a bottom end to your harmony here, because it takes away from the wandering quality. Like if there's this kind of happening below your bassoonist as they climb up and then hand off to the flute and so on. It's a wonderful idea to hand off bassoon to flute, and it can almost sound seamless with the right players, which you would never expect, right? But there's a point there in that tenor register and the low register of the flute, just so long as it's soft enough, right? The players do not get too rambunctious. Piano espressivo here. Same thing here. Espressivo with these parts. Yeah, I just have some doubts here. Kind of looking at the so the harmony above, it's just this is bothering me and this is bothering me. I just think you don't need either. Okay. This is cool. This was part of the first chord, But the second chord really stays up around these four pitches, and rightly so, right? I think just too much weight, too much of this just makes it feel like it's the same. It's kind of a slightly different version of the chord that happened before. Okay, just leave a gap. Let your wandering go wandering. All right, and then all right. So I feel that you don't, just like I mentioned before, you don't need a pitch to continue going under. Like it might feel, you might say, like, okay, well, it just really feels kind of naked, the way that everything just suddenly cuts out, and then you just have this, whatever, this solo line playing all by itself. So, why not add a little bit of continuing harmony? But that's actually the wrong thing, because when you add that harmonic context, this melody is no longer wandering, right? It's kind of no longer has any freedom to just to go wherever, who knows where it's going to land, right? It's sort of like spinning a dial. The audience is watching the dial and wondering what it's going to end up pointing to. So it's the same thing with this, right? If you give it too much context, people say, oh yeah, I see where this is headed. Yeah, you're fun. This is great. And then you kind of lose the sense of like mystery and solitude, right? A lot of this deals with solitude, right? So this, like, these wandering melodies are just wandering around and kind of going wherever. And here they're guided by the harmony, but here that's just like, there's nothing going on, right? So I think that, like, that moment, it's just a wasted moment with the beautiful solo violin that you've got here. And to make matters worse, even if it's triple P on the tuba here and pianissimo diminuendo on your middle winds here, I should just say clarinet family, with a little bit of doubling by the violas that were just at mezzo forte, that resonant quality is going to be pushing up into the solo and obscuring it, and so you won't hear like the richness and the nuance of the different notes of that, just like the real, just kind of really getting into that, like, just absolutely bare Romani players sitting on the street corner playing their solo violin. I just sort of feel that there's that kind of quality, the sort of street musician quality, just real down home folk kind of playing implied here. So not to try to influence you too much, like, that sounds like I'm arguing with you, but that's just what I feel here. So just something I feel pretty strongly that too much context takes away from the effect of the music here. All right, so continuing on, we're kind of down to the last section to evaluate, and I just think that this is so cool right in here. What have I marked in my criteria is calm surface over restless undercurrent, and you certainly have the restless undercurrent here, covered by some of these staggered notes right in here, traded off between the instruments. Such a cool idea. Double basses below with contrabassoon, and then bass clarinet and bassoon coming in after that, and then the English horn and clarinets playing, and so on. So it just is this wonderful back and forth trading off, and then you have got your brass right in here. Okay, so there's only one slight balance problem here, and that is that the violas are just going to get swallowed up. So are the second violins, right? And then if you start in here at pianissimo and push forwards, nobody's really going to hear it until around right here. With the brass playing at piano cantabile, I would be tempted to say dolce rather than cantabile. There's a certain, cantabile is in a singing style, so there's a certain connotation to me of like vibrato, right? Like, oh, so like I kind of tend to mark dolce, so it's like sweet, so there's a kind of an endearing quality to the decisions and the tone and everything else, rather than a kind of a singing style. When I see cantabile on a trumpet part, I sort of think of Maurice Andre, He used to play Baroque concertos with a ton of vibrato, right? Just what a lot of trumpet players today would consider to be completely tasteless. But I've got to say that guy's tone was just amazing, and a lot of his musical decisions, though they're very romantic and kind of idiosyncratic to him, were still just really musically really great. Maybe not for the repertoire that he was doing, but anyways, to get back to the broken octaves, yeah. So just like each of these pitches is kind of repeated back in the held notes in the lower winds and double basses and so on. So it's just a really, really cool way to interpret that. All right, so I'll get off of that. And then, looking at the way everything else is scored, we've got a cross voicing here of cellos above the harmony part here. So we've got octaves in second violins and cellos with the violas below, right? Yeah, and I'm not so sure why you have to go. For all of the pains that you took here, Craig, you might as well just have left your first violins at play and given your second violins a break, right? I think people would hear your first violins better. They're standing or they're sitting right next to the edge of the stage, and there'll be less worry about balancing them with the trumpet, sitting a few rows back. So, you don't have to do this fancy kind of dovetailing and so on. And here, cantabile, absolutely, right? Just really to get that wonderful emotional sound there. And that's being doubled by, right, just as you can see here, trombones and first trumpet. So it's a place where you might easily have marked your heavy brass pianissimo and your strings piano and gotten a really nice sound out of it. But I actually prefer piano, cantabile, and then maybe mezzo piano on your strings here. Just a little bit, just to try to get them to balance, because the way that this is scored, and you can hear it in the mock-up, there'll be barely any kind of string tone, sort of in this sort of weaker area where the brass are so resonant and rich, and the strings, they are rich, but they don't have that same kind of push to their projection, right? They just are in a weaker place compared to the brass. And then right in here, ba da 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 da, I'd try to push my, I would possibly even put a little bit of crescendo ahead of everybody else, so that they were already at mezzo forte by the time they got to here. But I see the need here for you to have unified dynamics. So I'm not going to say that you should do that, but I'm just thinking about the balance here and how you're keeping the strings in the middle register, and then adding on, there's already so much going on in that middle register in terms of these other instruments, right? That they almost become unnecessary as soon as things start to thicken up in here. So maybe except for the octaves in the in some of these parts in the melody, maybe this part right in here with the violas could change to more of a kind of octave melody kind of a thing, and you can just let the trombones and the other instruments take care of the middle voice for you. And then just I like this heartbeat that you've got going here, dun 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 dun. It's just so cool. In opposition to the it just really works great. Yeah, and then that push forwards, it's just so beautifully realized in your mock-up. Yeah, it works great. And then, just as I mentioned before, you should end with a little bit of a comma there. Yeah, just to place the downbeat at D. Anyway, so that is where I will stop, Craig. And just to kind of think that it's such a great orchestration, and I feel that you should, if you have any connections or any clout or anything like that, I'd try to get it performed, and then post a video of it on on YouTube, and then I'll link it in the group, or just post it in the group. Really, really a fine bit of work. Just like, I mean, it just feels like a professional score to me in a lot of ways. I mean, a lot of little things to tweak and so on and so forth. But whether you tweak those or not, it's essentially ready for the stands, and just has the most wonderful life to it. And I mean, it just seems like you understand something about the story of the piece, or you've realized a convincing version, a perception of what the piece is trying to say in music. And you have opened the door on that with your scoring, and I think it's really admirable. So great work, Craig. Just really, really excellent effort. So yeah, thank you once again for being a part of these yearly orchestration challenges, and and supporting at a time when we could really do something something positive for some people in a lot of need. And, like, I just think that it needs to be acknowledged with each one of these Patreon level entries, especially like towards the end, where the commitment of the participant was pretty high, and the a lot of heavy hitters stayed in the game, an extra month or two to help me raise even more money, which I'll talk about. I'll talk about next month when we have the finale. I hate to say finale because it's a it's a notation application, but when we have the grand finale of the orchestration challenge, I'm thinking maybe like early February. So yeah, so thanks again, man. Thank you, Patreon supporters, website subscribers, longtime viewers who are just watching every single one of these videos. It's really awesome. I really appreciate it. Hats off to you guys. And I will be back with yet another awesome score in a couple of hours. See you soon.